Alrighty guys, a very warm welcome to another video. Today we are doing episode 4 of the IRONMAN Shred series and a bit of a discussion on diet. Now, any discussion on diet does not come without controversy. People will be drawn to particular diets, one way or the other, or either extreme even of particular diets. And at the end of the day, I think, the way I look at it is this. You want to try and keep it as simple as possible. You want to try what works for you, do what works for you, but don't overcomplicate diet in terms of becoming overly restrictive if you don't, know what you're doing with it, and you're just doing it because you heard it might be good or whatever, because you can really get into problems, particularly from a hormonal aspect, which can take a long time to really recover from if you go too far down, I guess, the hole. So now, obviously, when we talk about fat loss or weight loss in general, it is calories absorbed and stored versus calories burnt, right? Calories in versus calories out, well, it's a bit more complicated than that. It's more absorbed and stored versus burnt. And it's definitely a difficult thing to measure in terms of what, you can't look at a banana and say exactly how many calories are in that one banana versus another banana. Obviously, they'll be very similar, but, different foods, obviously, there's variation. Packaging allows for a certain percentage of variation. And also, even if you could tell the exact calories of 100% perfection, what's also very difficult is to know how many of those are absorbed and stored. And that depends on, one, your digestion, and also it depends on the general state and metabolic health of your body. Because how one person who's metabolically very healthy, they have high levels of growth hormone or healthy levels of testosterone, growth hormone, healthy thyroid function, they don't have high cortisol and everything's working well, they will take a food item and process it much more efficiently than someone, or at least differently than someone who has low levels of growth hormone output because they're sleeping poorly, low levels of testosterone, very hypothyroid in nature. So they have low levels of free T3, which is your active thyroid hormone, high TSH. And they're going to take that food and really I guess they'll be more efficient actually because they'll store it and be more likely to store it as fat. And the difference is they're in a slow metabolic state or an unhealthy metabolic state or metabolic disease versus someone who's very, very healthy metabolically. Obviously, how they take those two same food items will be will be quite different in terms of how they're processed and stored. So I guess the main gist of it is that, calories absorbed versus calories burnt. It's also very difficult to know, of course, digestion, but then how many you store them. And then it's also very difficult to know exactly how many calories you burn because the measures of just reading heart rate, just reading wattage, measuring intensity of exercise, it's very difficult to exactly know these things 100%. Now, that's not to say that there's not utility in having a general idea of calories of food, of course. But what I would say is just don't obsess about it. And also don't be restrictive to the point whereby you're going to induce metabolic or slow your metabolism down. And that's a trap that people get into because with training and with the stress we put ourselves under with everything else in our life, the training is another stress. And what you don't want to be another stress on top of all that is your diet. You want your diet to actually be something that supports you and something that allows you to do more of what you want to do, training, working, spending time with family, rather than prevents you from doing that. So, and this is actually a good, I had Kristian Blummenfelt on the thumbnail of this video because he has been quite outspoken in saying that, look, I could probably get a little bit leaner in terms of body fat percentage. And for context, I actually think if you saw Kristian Blummenfelt in real life, he's not a big dude. On TV, compared to the super shredded other professional athletes, he looks a bit different, right? But he's not a big guy. But regardless, he's not as lean from a body fat percentage as many other professional triathletes. But he's been very outspoken in saying yeah, I could get down lighter, but then my training becomes compromised because I'm focusing more on diet. I don't have as much energy, I should say, to go train. So it's certainly a balance. And I think that particularly if you're not a professional, the focus should always be on doing or optimizing your training and lifestyle before you focus on or get worried about 1 or 2% body fat increases or decreases. But nonetheless, let's talk about keto diet versus high carb diet and their effects on metabolism and ultimately fat loss. So one of the things, I guess, that draws people towards keto is that particularly in the first week of going from a normal standard diet that includes fats, proteins, carbs to a ketogenic diet, is that you're going to have a drastic loss in basically glycogen / water weight. 1 gram of glycogen is needed to be, in order to store 1 gram of, I can't even speak now. In order to store 1 gram of glycogen in the muscles, in the liver, wherever, you need 3 grams of water. So, if your body can store a kilogram of glycogen, that's going to be 4 kilos of glycogen and water weight. So, and people can store more than that. So therefore, in the first week of cutting out carbs, when you burn through all those stores and you drop the water that comes with that, you're going to lose about 3 to 4 kilograms just from that alone. But it's very important to note that that is not, in fact, fat loss, even though you may feel lighter, look a bit leaner, a bit more shredded, and have lost weight on the scale. It's actually not really fat loss at all. It's just water and glycogen weight. So then you kind of get into this trap where you're like, well, I lost so much weight quickly, but then you kind of stagnate. So it's not to say that the ketogenic diet can't work for people. However, my general preference is to not go down that path, particularly if you're doing a lot of endurance where you're doing some intensity and you want to focus on optimizing training, because ultimately ketogenic diets will increase cortisol because carbohydrates suppress cortisol generally. And with that can come an impairment of thyroid hormone function in terms of T4 to T3 conversion, which is your inactive generally to your active version of thyroid hormone, and also an increase in TSH, which comes with its own issues in and of itself. One, you're becoming hypothyroid. Also, with increased TSH, your prolactin generally increases as well. So that's another issue, but that's a little bit out of the scope of this. You're also going to see an increase because you're not getting the insulin spike that comes along with eating carbohydrates generally. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. What is bad is chronically elevated insulin, so high fasting insulin, which can obviously be a sign of insulin resistance. But the general insulin spike and then decline back to normal levels isn't necessarily a bad thing when you're metabolically healthy. So without that insulin, without those carbs, generally what you're going to see on a ketogenic diet is an increase in SHBG, which is sex hormone binding globulin. And what this does is binds up testosterone, also DHT and estrogen. But when you're binding up testosterone, you're impairing or you're limiting the amount of free testosterone that's otherwise available for the body to be freely utilizing. So you're going to lower your free testosterone. And we know that testosterone is very lipolytic in nature. So it helps burn body fat, helps improve muscle mass. And generally, it's not something you want to be reducing if improving lean body mass and improving your body composition is a goal. The other thing as well, like we mentioned a little bit earlier on, is training intensity. When you cut carbs out, you can't really train at the intensity that you otherwise would be able to with carbohydrates in the system. Yes, you can go and do long, I guess, when you get through the initial few weeks of adapting to this diet, you can go and do long endurance stuff, but the real quality intensity will be minimized. And that can definitely help fat burning. I mean, doing that high quality intense training can help with fat burning. So, it's a bit of a trade-off there. Now, it's not to say you're not going to lose weight on the keto diet, but in my opinion, not many people stick with it long-term, because reason being is that, yes, in the short term, you're going to lose weight, but in the long run, generally, not everyone, but a lot of people will become metabolically unhealthy in terms of setting their hormonal profiles and their metabolism up into a fat storing state rather than a fat burning state. So next we talk about high carb or moderate to high carb diets. And this is where I think most people should be looking to if their focus is performance and even fat loss. And the reason being is that carbohydrates definitely get a bad rap, but look at all of the regions of the world that are lean, Asia, the African countries, a lot of them eat a high percentage of carbohydrates, not necessarily an absolute shit ton, but they eat a high percentage of carbohydrates relative to like even a Western diet, and none of them are massively overweight. It's more when they start increasing their fat alongside everything else, then they start to gain weight. So with a high carb diet though, realize that initial weight loss, if weight loss is your goal, it will be slow comparative to keto, because in the first week, you ain't going to lose that 3, 4, 5, 6 kilograms of glycogen and water weight. So you're not going to see initial very fast results. However, and this is where I think it's important to focus on the long term, is that not cutting carbs out of your diet and actually maintaining a healthy level of carb intake to support your training, support your hormones, is generally going to help you to support an optimal long-term metabolism. So whereby your thyroid can be functioning well, you have adequate amounts of free testosterone, you're not chronically elevating cortisol, which is going to affect the metabolism in the long run as well. So increasing or even just maintaining a moderate level of carbohydrate intake should not be feared when fat loss is the goal, particularly in the long term, because ultimately, who really cares if you get lean in like 3 months, but then for the next 9 months you're battling a slow metabolism and weight gain and rebound. My way of looking at it is that we should always focus on the long term. So carbohydrates generally going to lower cortisol. They're going to reduce SHBG a little bit, particularly if it's on the higher end. Increasing free testosterone. They're going to support production of serotonin and melatonin, which can help optimize sleep, which we know is very important for fat burning. Generally, they aid in assisting the conversion of T4 to T3 via other mechanisms, not directly, but via their effect on endocrine system generally. So, of course, everything is nuanced, and that's not just say eat as much as you possibly can until you feel sick, because then you're going to probably gain weight. But just don't fear carbs and don't try and go low carb if long-term healthy, sustainable, even happiness, but then generally fat loss, obviously over the course of 5, 10, 20 years in the sport of triathlon is your goal. Because I think if you look at most people that go keto, they'll do it for 6 months, 1 year, 2 years, and either burn out or kind of revert back to, a moderate to high carbohydrate diet in the long run anyway. So what would have been better is if they didn't go through that 2 years of poor training and mucking around with it and feeling like, why aren't I getting any better? Why have I kind of stagnated in my fat loss? Why am I slowing my metabolism down? And they had have just kept a healthy diet that whole time, not cut carbs, not chase the short-term satisfaction of seeing the weight drop on the scale because you're losing glycogen and water, and have just, slowly lost weight or slowly lost fat mass and improved their body composition over the course of 6 months, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. Because obviously none of this stuff should be rushed. And if fat loss is your goal in particular, the biggest mistake that you can do is rush it, because you're ultimately going to slow your metabolism down when you cut calories too sharply, but also take entire food groups out of the mix, like carbohydrates, which is so important for your metabolism. So there's obviously a lot more nuance to all this discussion, but I think the key message is to keep it simple with your diet. Focus on whole foods if possible. Get the supplemented or the processed foods in if you're not reaching your calorie goals to support your training, and generally eat balanced and don't be too restrictive on either side. Don't cut carbohydrates out or go, Atkins, like just pure protein or anything like that, because, everyone's unique we're all unique in what might be, precisely best for each individual, different genetics, but physiology across the board stays the same. And when you're working at a certain percentage of intensity, we're all burning carbohydrates. So that's the way I see it. So hopefully that was some interesting information for you guys. Take care. Post any questions below. Happy training, and I'll see everyone in the next video.